Hey students, Dr. D here again for our third and final introductory video. I'm going to share my screen with you. And if you haven't watched the actual first video, introductory video here, and the content video here, watch those first. We're now to the lab video. And we're going to jump right into the lab syllabus. I've already bookmarked this here. I've got this here. So this is the lab syllabus. This is really going to be spent time going over the lab syllabus, showing you the shopping list for materials, and then also showing you a lab, so what it looks like and how to make sure you've got all your materials and get through the lab. Okay, so here's the schedule. Once again, don't worry about dates, depending on when you're taking it. We're not focusing on that. Just a layout. You've got the list of the experiments. There's 7 experiments with the due dates. There is only one lab that requires more than 1 day, and that is this one here, that air particulates requires 7 days of observation. So I give you a start date to make sure you start it well enough in advance to get, the lab done and then submitted. Also, the first thing you'll be doing is filling out that safety agreement. So that's the first Dropbox you'll see when you go to the Dropbox. There'll be set up, if I can show you that, labs. I think I've already showed you that, labs and worksheets. That's just simply, signing your name and checking a box or something like that. And the first 2 labs do not require any materials other than a website for radioactive decay and a graphing project for lab 1. So this is the graphing I've been telling you about. It jumps right in. So you need to get comfortable with a graphing program. And I mentioned I have a video for that, and you can also just YouTube whatever program you're using and watch a couple YouTube videos. So it gives us some time. That's especially important in the summer to get our materials before you actually need to do an experimental lab. The first experimental lab is lab 3. So that's our schedule. And then it says here, labs 3, 4, 5, and 7. So 3, 4, 5, and 7 are the ones which require supplies that you have to purchase and also require pictures to prove that you're doing the experimental labs. Okay. And that's explained down below. As always, with all assignments, everything's due at 11:59 p.m. on a specific due date. Simply email me if you have any questions, but basically everything's contained within the lab worksheet. There's no manual for the course. It's got all the information you need. Just pay attention to detail, read it carefully, and look over the procedure. Again, submitted through Dropbox. Everything is submitted as far as worksheets and labs through Dropbox. There's 7 labs, 20 points each. Notice that your lowest is dropped, but it's your lowest completed lab. The reason we do this is because if you're taking this class on the ground, you're doing at least 9 labs, if not 10 or 11. So in those cases, they allow you to drop your lowest, and it's just could be a missed lab. Since we're only doing 7 labs, I require you to do them all. You must do them all or you fail the course. That's simple. You can hand them in late. So not a problem. You have a death in the family, you get sick, just hand it in late, no problem. So the maximum, since you're only counting 6, is 120 points, and this is about 24% of your grade. Again, got to complete them all. And completion requires authentication by pictures. And that's specifically for labs 3, 4, 5, and 7. Those are the only ones you need pictures for. The other ones you're just doing worksheets. Regardless of your point total, you cannot pass the lab unless you complete all the labs. Doing a lab or completing a lab is defined as a gradable lab in which greater than 70% of the work has been completed. What that does is it keeps people from just filling out a few things and submitting and saying, oh, I completed all the labs. You can't do that. You've got to do at least 70% of the work. You also need a 60% lab to pass the course. So if you have a 95 in lecture and a 59% in lab, you fail the course. Shouldn't be a problem. The grades in the lab are good. The grades in the class are generally good. It's really about the amount of material and the management of your time. If you're good at managing your time, pay attention to what needs to be done, you should have no problem getting an A or B in this course. Okay, you'll be using a shopping list to figure out what you need to buy, and you want to get moving on that as soon as possible. These are for the experimental labs again. Once again, this shopping list is basically suggestions. In lots of cases, you can substitute. Things are often sold in bulk, so you can share if you know anybody else in the class, or you can go local where you might be able to get a smaller quantity, like at Walmart or a drugstore. I give you suggestions for alternatives. You can borrow, things like that. There's no laboratory manual for the course. The one thing that's important to realize is if you choose not to buy what I put on the list and you decide to substitute and then you run into problems, then that's your responsibility. If you have inadequate materials, you can't do the lab. So for certain things, you're going to want to purchase stuff like Petri dishes, possibly test tubes with a test tube rack, certainly pH strips, things you're not going to be able to easily replace. Okay. Now, even though it's an at-home lab with pretty simple materials, safety is still incredibly important. You should be wearing glasses at all times. I put those on the shopping list. Don't eat or drink while doing the lab. Keep kids away from the area. And there's the safety contract you have to fill out before you do any of the labs. I won't grade any of your labs if you don't do the safety contract. As far as the procedure that's written up in each lab, be sure to read it carefully. Read it ahead of time all the way through, and then you'll be going through it step by step and doing the lab. But that's going to make sure you understand it as you read it through. Make sure you get all your supplies out and ready to go. Especially with the experimental labs, go ahead and do that a couple days in advance so you make sure you've got all your supplies. Again, the assignment schedule has all your due dates. Now, let's look at completion of labs. The lab report you submitted can be found under assignments for the respective module. There's a whole table of contents section on the lab experiments, or under each module, you can also access them through there. Please do not change the format of the lab report. I have it specifically formatted for easy grading with my key. Okay, so don't go changing. If there's a table there, don't delete the table, those types of things. Pay attention to due dates. All experimental labs must include 3 pictures. So that's 4 of the labs. That's 12 pictures. These prove to me that you bought the materials, you have the materials that are needed, and that you've done the lab. So showing the results of the lab is imperative. So what I tell students, 1 picture should show all the materials. They can be set up or just laid out. 1 picture showing the initial conditions and 1 picture showing the final results. For instance, in some case, you might be filtering a polluted water sample. So initial conditions would be the polluted water sample with the test tubes and beakers, and the final would be that filtered water through the filters and showing it clean, that type of thing. If there's a color change, that's a initial and final results. The pictures will be needed to be copied into the lab. Any graphing will need to be copied into the lab because Dropboxes are all set up to submit and accept only 1 file. If you're not working in Word and you're working in Pages, then you'll have to submit it to convert it to a PDF. Okay? And that's not a bad idea anyway. I've found that some students that just submit the Word document with a pasted graph, sometimes the graph is not formatted correctly. So if you save it as a PDF, sometimes that helps with maintaining the formatting of that graph. If you don't include the 3 pictures, you get a score of 0 on the lab, and therefore, since you have to do all labs, you automatically fail the course. But labs are always accepted late, no matter how late. Up to the last day of classes. So if you just forget to add the pictures, you can add the pictures and resubmit it. It'll overwrite the old lab. That's not a problem, you know? Or if you forgot to take the pictures, you might have to redo the lab, but you can always submit it late. Again, if there's a graph involved, that's going to need to be copied into the document. Only 1 document accepted. Academic honesty, you're welcome to reach out to each other if you know someone in the class or through the discussion boards and work together and talk about things. But ultimately, when you fill out the answers, you do that yourself, okay? Read everything carefully, pay attention to details, follow instructions. There's the note once again on graphing. I think I mentioned that in one of the other videos also. Whether you're using Excel or numbers, I've given you a video to help you. Of course, my video is specifically for Excel, but they're very similar. But there's also YouTube available for doing that. So that's the lab. So again, pictures are needed. All labs must be completed or you fail the course. So what I'm going to do now is actually show you the shopping list. So this is the list of materials that you have to purchase. Down here, we see the shopping list. So you can see I've got links to Amazon. Now, you might have received an email from me already that's got my wish list. So, that's got the same thing. It's going to have links to all these materials. Okay. And I give you alternatives, or a well-graduated measuring cup if you don't want to buy the 100 mil graduated cylinder. Buying the chemistry stuff makes for a nice experience, but I get that some people are strapped for cash. Some stuff you got to buy, like I said, you're not going to be able to find pH test strips unless you have a pool, but these are specific ones, so make sure they're similar. Petri dishes, but things like baking soda, petroleum jelly, those you might have, or can buy at a market pretty cheaply. Things are often sold in bulk at Amazon, so, markets might be better. Get moving on the shopping list as soon as possible. Again, you're free to substitute, free to reach out to me if something's sold out or back ordered, you want an alternative, things like that. But most of the stuff is pretty basic, so you should be able to get alternatives pretty easily, find things you can use. So this is the shopping list that you're going to use and get started on right away. The last thing I want to show you is I've got a lab pulled up, and you're going to want to look at this also. So this is the first experimental lab, lab 3, is dilution to solution to pollution. All labs start up with an introduction, which has all the information you need to really answer the questions that are built into the lab. And then you've got safety and materials. And this will match up with the shopping list: 100 mil graduated cylinder or a well-graduated measuring cup. Dark food coloring, 4 test tubes or 4 clear vials, and it tells you how much to have to hold. Okay, beakers or 4 to 6 ounce identical glasses, gloves optional, you see. And of course, safety, eye protection is required for any of the experimental labs. And it tells you how to dispose of things too. And then there's your procedure. This one's got a long procedure, but it's really just, well, it's actually not that long. It's just reproduction. You got to do things over and over again. It's called dilution, okay? And then here's the lab report. This is what I mean by not changing the format. Just simply type over this. This will be in Word or PDF format. So most of you are going to need to use the Word format to be able to edit it. And then you've got a series of questions related to the lab. And sometimes you got a little calculations and understanding stuff. This is what you need to submit. I don't care if you want to delete this part of it and just hand in the report or hand in the whole thing. That doesn't matter to me. But once again, you'll only be submitting one document. So the pictures will be pasted at the end of your document. And it's 3 pictures. You can put them all on one page, or 1 picture per page if you want to leave them big. I really don't care, as long as I can see the pictures. But, and then any graphing you would also copy and paste into here. So that's a typical lab and how it's laid out. So make sure you look at those closely also. And the last thing I wanted to do is just take you back once again to the assignment schedule and show you that the assignment schedule has all of the lab dates due dates built in. And it's also got suggestions for when to start labs. And typically I just tell you the day before it's due, except for the one that requires 7 days of observation. I tell you to start it quite a bit in advance of when it's due. Okay, but that's got all the lab dates. It also reminds you which ones require pictures, reminds you about due times and all of that. It reminds you about the late policy. So I'm going to stop my share now and tell you that's the third and final of the introductory videos. And what you need to do now is get started on buying your materials, ordering them, and get started with the material, doing your safety agreement. If you haven't done the academic pledge, do that first also. Good luck with everything, and reach out when you have questions. And that's the end of this video.